Hi everybody, this is Andy Chen. I've been coming here almost every seminar, every webinars, and welcome everybody. And it gets to a regular thing for me on a Thursday to get to interfacing and talk to everybody. And this is something I'm really looking forward to it. Um, I met VJs for 2 weeks ago, so virtually, and we are in a meeting together. And subsequently, I was just cruising around the LinkedIn and I saw this post and I read it and it really resonated with me what it talked about the leadership, today's leadership, especially in today's world when you see the different styles of leadership. And when VJ break it down to the different simple facts and simple mechanisms, it really resonated with me. And I thought it's such a great ideas that to help everybody to communicate effectively in all levels. And I think this is applicable to almost every level, leaders or every day you can use it to as a practice for that. And certainly I'm learning a lot from here, so I'm looking forward to today's sessions. So VJ, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for that. I'll just share my presentation. Thanks. So I'll just start off with what Andy said. In present day leadership communication, it's not just relevant for a leader, it's relevant for everyone, because at multiple phases of our life or multiple phases of our professional life, we do take up leadership roles, might be in a small team of just maybe 3 people, might be in a big company where we are leading 10,000, 15,000 people. But as career grows, unless you are someone who is technically really sound and just wants to be, let's say, a software developer throughout your life, uh, most of the career paths actually lead to a position of leadership, and that's where it becomes important to understand how you communicate as a leader, because definitely how you communicate with your best friend, how you communicate with your partner is different from how you communicate with your colleagues, and is different how you communicate with someone in the senior management, and this is again different with how you communicate when you are in leadership position. So today's session, it's split into multiple points, 2 sections basically. First section is just talking about the principles of leadership communication, which definitely kind of like as Andy said, it's not just restricted to leadership communication, but communication in general. Some of the examples which I'll be building upon, I've taken 3 examples. So one is May 11th speech of Jacinda Ardern, who is the New Zealand Prime Minister. One is the May 12th speech from Narendra Modi, who is the Indian Prime Minister. And the third one is actually the communication that Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky, I believe, sent out to his employees, because Airbnb were laying off almost 25% of their workforce. And so these 3 examples, 2 from, let's say, world leaders, and 1 from a person in a private company who is reaching out to his employees. And obviously, the scenario, all these 3 scenarios, so Narendra Modi's scenario and Jacinda Ardern's scenario, is based on communicating regarding the whole coronavirus issue, which is again not it's difficult times. It's kind of crisis communication, and that's exactly what Brian is also doing from Airbnb. He's also communicating during a crisis with his team. The primary reason why definitely I've taken 3 negative scenarios is crisis communication is the most difficult part of leadership communication, or any kind of communication. These are things you can plan, but you can never plan enough. How you communicate when things are going wrong is what defines a leader. So just probably a very short thing about me. So so professionally, I'm a content designer and communications consultant. So content designer is, so throughout my career, I have been basically been a content writer, and I've been in comms. Content designer is a role I kind of started defining very recently. It's a very new field. So content designer is a mix of communications, user experience, and user research. and a bit of user psychology, so which includes all this. So kind of mixes all my both my passions of design and content writing. Very recently, I started a blog slash consultancy service called Typewriter Media, whereas earlier mentioned, I blog about communications and content design. Very recent, to say how recent, probably I registered here it in Australia probably just 8 days back. That's how recent it is. But that's a side gig. Professionally, I work as a projects and communications officer with Monash University, where I did my master's for 2 years. And before that, so presently I'm based out of Melbourne. Before that, throughout my life, ever since I was born, I was in India. I was with IEEE Kerala section, and that's why I know Aisha and a lot of other people. That's where my IEEE journey started. So I've been an IEEE member for 12 years until 2016 with Kerala section, and from 2017 onwards with the Victorian section. And I recently started volunteering with IEEE temps. So the first thing that you need to understand is a good leader, or let's say, again, you can say a great leader, is a great communicator. So notice a point that I've said. A good leader is a great communicator. I didn't say orator. It's not just about having the ability to say or orate properly. It's about being able to communicate. And that's where I think a lot of people misinterpret the meaning or the difference between a great orator and a great communicator. Sometimes someone might be a great orator, and a couple of examples I'll be talking here. They might be a great orator, but are they communicating exactly with their audience? Are they able to build a connection? Because end of the day, no matter what you need to communicate, it's all about building that connection. I'll talk, sorry, I'll talk about the principles. So ideally from my own research, from what I have done. So one thing, especially because I've been in the field of communication, I like analyzing speeches of world leaders. Maybe if not all, but whenever I do get time, I read through the transcripts. So when possible, first I see the video to see how's their body language, how are they communicating, how's their eye contact, all those things. And on the other side, I also go through in detail with the transcripts. So kind of helps me also learn, what's good. So let's say I've been in communication since 2011. So that's been like what 9-10 years. But even now, even say a couple of weeks back, when I saw the communication that Airbnb CEO Brian sent out, there were a lot many things I learned new. So like everything, it's something you learn every day. There's no situation where you know everything, and that's exactly how communication goes. You can never be a perfect communicator. There's always chance to improve. So to start off, so this is to give you a context. This is considering some of you are either already leaders. So when I say leaders, you might be leading a team of 2 people, 3 people, or you might be leading teams of 10,000, 15,000. Or sometime in the future, you want to become a great leader. So this kind of gives you at least a skeletal point of view of what you need to know regarding how you're communicating. So the first and most important point, which actually is not spoken about much when they talk about what makes a person a great communicator, is being able to listen properly. So as a leader, one thing you need to understand is the very first step of being a great communicator, a great leader, is you need to listen. You need to listen in whatever context, be it in a government context, be it in a volunteering context like IEEE, be it in a professional context where, let's say, you're the manager of a company. It's about being able to listen. And when I say listen, it's about listening without any prejudgments. So listen carefully. Presently, let's say, considering you are working in a private company and you are in a role where you do take surveys from people. So that is one kind of feedback. That's one way of listening to people. Social media, if you are a company with a fairly good size of people, or maybe even if it's 5 people, listen to what your employees are talking about you on social media, because that's one thing which mostly people put things on social media either when they're very happy or when they're really annoyed. So another example is very recently, so along with Airbnb, Uber also did quite a bit of layoffs. And one thing which I'm not sure how many of you noticed was uh, a good number of people who were laid off from Uber were actually putting a post on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and everything actually had a very positive tone. Sorry, everything had a very positive tone. No one was blaming that, oh, Uber sent me out, they did this, they did that. Everyone almost everyone used one word, that's gratitude. They had gratitude towards Uber for how they took care of them. Even in such a scenario, they understand the business point where they had to be laid off. But even in the whole process of being laid off, how the company listened to their pain points and how the company treated them in those difficult times. That was something the people were grateful for. So, either ways, positive, negative, it's always good to listen, because only once you know what the pain points are of your target audience, then you can understand what what they actually need to hear. And that's speaking on that. Maybe just take an example of the last few days, as some world leaders have been absolutely tone deaf of what's happening in their country or in their region. So you can kind of understand, either they are not listening, or maybe they're listening but they don't want to hear what's happening. That takes me to the second point. So context. So when I say communication, just keeping it simple, when I say communication, uh, can be written communication, can be something you're speaking, might be a speech, might be a team meeting where you're addressing your team. Uh, the For this speech, so the context for this talk, mostly, like I said, I'll try to keep it considering there's something negative that you need to convey, because always conveying something negative is the most difficult part. Conveying something happy or positive news is, it's easy. That's it, done. But whenever it's something difficult, if you're laying off people, or if there's been some kind of security breach in the company, or the company is facing any legal issues, those are the kind of things where you have to be really sensitive about the words you use. So whenever you're communicating, one thing is always explain the context. So as a leader, or as someone in the middle management or senior management, you might be knowing a lot of the things, you might be knowing almost everything that's happening in the company, but it's not necessary that, sorry, that all your employees also know about what's happening. They might just know 10% of what's happening. So whenever you are passing on any relevant information, or whenever you're communicating as a leader, make sure you explain the context well. And this is where I'll state this example of Airbnb CEO Brian's. So just no need to read through the whole thing, but then like just look at the very first sentence. Let me start with how we arrived at this decision. So he like in his email, he earlier talks about that layoffs are going to happen, and then he actually very much in detail explains the context of why they're taking this decision, what's happening in the industry. He also talks about them raising capital, but at the same time them Airbnb having to cut cost. That kind of goes across all verticals of the company. So it's easy for the people, or let's say the employees, to understand when the context is given, that okay, so now I know the context, so when you tell them about the information or what's happening, it's easier for them to understand and adapt. Another point, third point, would be empathy and not ego. So empathy is probably a word I'll use a lot during this talk, and also in what I always try to convey. So whenever I act as a consultant and I give my consultancy services, empathy is one word I use a lot. So not just as a leader, even when you're communicating, let's say you have a marketing business and you're communicating with your customers and consumers. So it's always about empathy. It's always about putting yourself in their shoes and trying to understand, what situation they are in. Yep. And rather than it's not about being a leader, it's not about making the communication flow top to bottom. It's kind of like starting at the bottom, listening to them, understanding what their pain points are, and then you try to communicate to them with empathy what's happening. So in those scenarios, it's easy to focus on being egocentric or being egoistic, because very honestly saying, if you are someone who is in a leadership position, day in and day out, you're treated with respect by everyone. So basic human psychology, there is a very high chance of ego creeping into the way you communicate. You might not know it, but one good point or good way to understand that is, let's say, that's why most people have speechwriters. So most good leaders, great leaders have speechwriters, because then there is a third person, a second person, and a third person who is kind of reviewing it and making sure that you don't, even if you are someone who has an ego, that is not seen in the way you communicate. Sorry, just give me a moment. Sorry. Take this example of Jacinta Ardern. This is from a speech. So this is towards the starting part of her speech, within the first couple of minutes. So she talks, she kind of relates, empathizes with the kids, the mothers, the New Zealand citizens, the Kiwis in general. And she understands that, she conveys that she has understood the difficulty they are facing, the difficulty with people losing their lives, losing their property. She has written the children who wrote to me about missing birthdays. So no, just that's the kind of intricacy, the detailing she has gone into. She has even addressed children, because obviously children might not be listening to her speech. Okay, so they basically may have no importance in what she's communicating. But when you hear that, when you listen to that, that's the way she's communicating empathy. That's the way she's connecting to each and every citizen of a country in a personal manner. I'm not sure how many of you actually heard that particular speech or any of the other speeches Jacinta has given. For me personally, I'm a huge fan of her, especially after the Christchurch shootings that happened last year, and her first speech to the community, to her citizens after that, the way she crafted it, again, the empathy, the simplicity with which she said that, that's what a great communicator is about. That's what the great leader is about. And like, if you can just see the news, the whole world is applauding her, not just for her leadership, I mean, definitely for her leadership, but also the way how she is able to communicate. Because end of the day, it's the way that she is able to communicate with her citizens, with the team, with her ministry, is what's making her a great leader. Fourth point would be non-verbal communication. So this is more like when you're facing people. So when I say when you're facing people, be it through a WebEx, through Zoom, we are on stage talking to them, or maybe you're in a meeting room of 12 people and they're talking to your team. Non-verbal communication is also something that's really important. And when I say non-verbal communication, it's about how are you sitting, how you're standing. Sorry. Are you looking people on in their eyes, as they say, it's, are you making eye contact when talking to them? Just look at some of the leaders. I'm not saying good leaders or great leaders. Look at some of the world leaders right now. Analyze, probably just go through 1 minute of everyone's speech, and you will understand some of them are directly looking at, let's say, the camera or the people in front of them, talking to them directly, not just looking at one person or two people. They're looking at everyone, they're addressing everyone. Some of them don't look straight at the people, they look up or they look at the wall oppositely. So they kind of refuse making eye contact. So let's say non-verbal communication, they say if someone's not making eye contact, it's either they're telling lies or they are not confident of what they're communicating, and lots such things. Also, it's about, let's say, when you're standing at a dais and when you're talking, it's about are you standing straight, or you're kind of like just very casual and just leaning on one arm and like, giving that attitude that I don't care about what I'm communicating, or I don't care about the people I'm communicating with. So along with the words you say, the non-verbal communication is also something you have to be really, really careful about. So when I say that, I'll also say just a personal example. So the team I was working with for the past 1 year. So I just recently left them and I joined a new project. So one thing which I really respected about, so we started we started working from home in March itself. So March, April, May, we had Zoom meetings every day for 3 months. And one thing which I noticed was my manager, who was the director of the institute I was working in, of the division I was working in, every single day, morning when we had our team meeting, initially it started with the whole team being formal, even I was formal, but then gradually over 1 week or 2 weeks down the line, everyone started being in their t-shirts and their pajamas, and it was kind of chill. It was a casual environment. But irrespective of that, the director, every single day for 3 months when I was in the meeting, every single morning he would be there wearing a suit and tie. uh, I wouldn't say he was overdressed, but as a leader, as someone in that position, he was making that impression that I mean business. We might be working from home, but we are still working. I mean business, and that was the kind. That was the that's what he was communicating. That's the aura he was giving, and I personally, like, people might have different opinion, but I personally found it really, really inspiring, really good of him as a leader. Though personally, I was not doing that, not wearing formals all the time, only when it was suitable for me. So not it's the way you're dressed, the way you communicate, uh, the strength of your handshake, all those things, eye contact, all those things consider about the nonverbal communication, and it gives off a lot of vibes, lots of feedback about how you are as a person and as a leader. Next point would be about first words. So this is important. So whenever you're communicating, so be it an email, be it, like I said, be it an email, be it when you're talking to your team, be it a speech, the first words are very important. Let's say the first 10 seconds of your communication. When you're talking, the first 10 seconds, when you're writing anything, the first two sentences are really important because they set the tone. The first 1 minute is probably when your audience is the most attentive about what you're speaking. So if you can capture the audience's attention in those initial first minute, if you can connect to them emotionally on a personal level in those first 1 minute, that's when they can actually sit through your whole speech or sit through your whole communication or read through your email or any kind of long communication, because it's those first words which make your impression, which make your mark. So even if it's something as small as an email, my very strong suggestion would be focus on the first words because they set the tone. I'll give you from my point of view, one good and one bad example. So uh, this is from Narendra Modi's speech, the Indian Prime Minister, that happened on May 12th. And this was, so he gave it in Hindi. This is the English transcript I received from his official website. So for me, again, this is a personal opinion and personal but professional opinion. I personally wasn't very impressed with the opening. So my personal opinion was it starts off very negative. So this is in May. So that's Corona. The pandemic has been already been there around for 2 or 3 months. So people are already in that whole negative mindset that there's a pandemic going on. Lots of people are losing their lives. Lots of people are losing their jobs. The economy is going down. So everyone's in already a very negative mindset. And at those moments, conveying that what 42 lakh people or 420,000 people have been infected, 275 or 2.75 lakh people have died. In India also people have died. I personally felt that my opinion is that wasn't necessary. That's something people already know of. Acknowledging the situation is different. So what I personally liked was on May 11th, the speech that Jacinda gave, she acknowledged about the situation, but she didn't delve into it saying that, oh, people have lost their lives, I'm sorry. She acknowledged the sacrifices people made. So that's a different way of putting it. So that's more like conveying that, consider this, who makes a sacrifice? Only someone who has the strength makes a sacrifice. So that's what she was trying to, she conveyed, acknowledge the sacrifices people have made and what they are trying to do together to beat the whole pandemic. This was the very first sentence he spoke, and if you can kind of see the difference, this example and this one, the difference is very clear. So it's not me kind of putting out my opinion. It's when you read them, the difference is very clear. The audience is different. Yes, one person is catering to an Indian audience, one person is connecting to the Kiwi audience, but end of the day, both of them are connecting to people. Both of them are the prime minister of the, sorry, both of them are prime minister of their respective countries, and they're trying to connect to their people. And the one way you connect with any person globally is connecting with emotion, connecting to them in a one-on-one manner. And in that manner, exactly when I think of this, so I actually listened to Jacinta's speech also, and I just listened with my eyes closed. And I have been to New Zealand for like just 5 days. I have no connection with New Zealand whatsoever. By birth, by citizenship, by heart, I'm an Indian. I work in Australia. Nothing to do with Jacinta Ardern, but listening to her speech, it connected to me very well because her whole speech, if you get the time, read it or listen to it, her whole speech is very personal. She talks about I and we. She talks in a sense where she's talking to you directly. She's talking just one on one. She's not announcing. And sadly, that's one thing I felt about Narendra Modi's speech. It was more of an announcement rather than a conversation. So try to understand the difference. As a leader, you definitely you definitely would need to make lots of announcements. But end of the day, you need to remember every announcement that you make is actually a conversation you're making with each and every single person who is in your audience. The next point would be clarity of information. So definitely, if you have any information to give, don't beat around the bush. Get to the point specifically. So again, I'll give an example of Jacinta's speech. So look at this. So on Thursday, this is what's happening. On Monday the 18th, this is what's going to happen. On Thursday, this is what's going to happen. So she keeps it. The information is very clear. The information is crisp. So regarding crispness, I'll come again. But for a person who is listening, it's not very difficult to kind of understand. And this is another example from Brian from Airbnb. So just this is a part of his speech. So this is somewhere midway through his speech. So look at that. What is written here is what will happen next. I want to provide clarity to all of you as soon as possible. So he even acknowledged, he even goes on record and says that I want to provide you clarity. So that's what, as a leader, both of them, that's what they're doing. They know that people need clarity. One person is saying that I know you need clarity, so this is what I'm telling you. The other person just does not use the word clarity, but is making sure that the way she provides the information is pretty clear. And this, I think I already mentioned, speak to a person, not a group. So that's what, as a leader, you can make announcements, you can make a speech, but end of the day, you need to understand if your audience is 5 people, your audience is 10 people, your audience is 10,000 people, you have to speak to a person. You are not speaking to a group. I would always recommend, instead of saying, no, oh, look at all of you, what and all this, just use the word you. No need of all, you all. It's always about you. You are trying to connect as a good leader, as a good communicator, you're trying to connect with everyone individually. Be crisp. I think I already made that clear with Jacinta's example. And I'll just take this example of Brian of Airbnb again. So this is again through a speech where he's talking about what when the layoffs are happening, layoffs are happening, the information for them. So he makes it very clear regarding 14 weeks of base pay, what will happen if you have worked in the company for these many years, if not these many years. And he goes on to explain about the medical benefits and all those things. So he makes it very clear. He doesn't beat around the bush and say, oh, we thought about it a lot, and then we are being very generous to do this and that for you. Just being very crisp to the point, because as a CEO, he understood that the people he is speaking to, they are people who have either lost their jobs or are people who still have their jobs but are living in very testing times, in a very difficult economy, and especially with what's happening in the country in the last couple of weeks, in a very negative atmosphere in various parts of the country. So people would be mentally stressed out. Some of them would even be financially stressed out. So he is kind of giving solutions, and that's definitely what great leaders do. No jargons. Keep it simple. So one thing which whenever I consult with a client of mine, one thing which I always say is, whenever you're preparing an email, let's say an email or speech to address your employees at large, always keep it as simple as possible. So unless let's say you're talking to specifically to your IT team, okay, then you might use some of the jargons which they can understand, which they know as well as the back of the hand. That's fine. That makes sense. But whenever you're talking to a larger crowd, or even otherwise also, like when I say you're talking to an IT team, does not mean you just put in all kinds of geek stuff into a talk. It's always about connecting to them in a human manner, and people, no matter who they are, they might be the most techie, geeky, nerdy kind of people in the world, but even they talk like humans. They don't talk in computer code. So you need to understand that when you're talking, keep it as simple as possible. And when you are in doubt, consider the lowest common denominator. So let's say you are addressing all the people in your company or all the people in your team. So let's take the example of a team. You lead a team of say 12 or 15 people, and you need to address all of them. Keep the lowest common denominator in mind. So that would be, let's say, consider the person who has the least experience, or consider the person who has been in the company or in the team for the least amount of time. What are the things that particular person might not know? Okay, consider those factors, and then according to that, prepare your communication, be it your email or speech. Then according to that, prepare, because then you know that you're not leaving anyone out. But else, what happens is you might talk some jargons or stuff they don't have a context about, they don't know about, and then they basically just lose the whole interest in what they're communicating. And that's, as a good leader, that's not something you want to have. Provide a CTA. So CTA would be a call to action. So that's kind of like, especially this is necessary, especially towards the end of it all. So uh, if you're doing it in the, let's say, in the middle part of your communication, it's okay, but it's always preferred to give it towards the end, because obviously that's what people listen to last, and that's what people take away the most. So it's about providing a call to action. It's about what to do next. Again, I'll take the example of Jacinta Ardern, and this is again something I really like, because again connecting on a human basis. So this is the end of a speech on May 12th, May 11th that happened. This is the end, and look at the last sentence: keep your distance and be kind. Both of them are actually call to actions. She's saying keep your distance, but at the same time being kind. It's not rocket science. She's not asking you to stay indoors for 14 days or do this, do that. It's very simple. She's telling you, and at the same time, simple and effective, because that's what's needed in a pandemic like this. Obviously, you need to keep a distance, and at the same time, you need to be kind towards yourself, your own mental health, your own physical health, and kind towards others, kind towards the whole society. So this was actually a very good call to action. So when you're communicating, always finish with a positive call to action. So no matter, so when I say positive call to action, let's again consider the example of Brian talking to his Airbnb team. This is again the end of it, the last part of his email that was sent out to all the Airbnb staff. So he splits it into two. So to those of you staying, so to all the people who are staying in the company, he just says, no, let's honor and let's say thanks to the people who are leaving, because end of the day, they will always be a part of Airbnb story. At the same time, to the people who are leaving Airbnb, I'm sorry, I know it's not your fault. I understand, I empathize with you. You have qualities and talents that you brought to Airbnb that the world needs. And so that's a different kind of a CTA, because when you think of it, that's not a very direct CTA, but he understands that to the people who are living Airbnb, he has already, before in his speech, has already said what the steps that the company is doing to take care of you. So with pay, with medical, with insurance, with the devices that they have, he has already communicated that. So he kind of ends it with a call to action saying that, I appreciate you. You are skilled people. There is definitely something good coming forward, and thank you for being with us. So that is a call to action where he's thanking them. So it kind of brings closure to the people. So they have already been informed that what they need to be informed in terms of the tangible matter, but in terms of the emotional part of the CEO saying thank you, you were important, that kind of emotion. So his call to action there was that emotion going forward. Whereas if you look at Jacinta Ardern's case, it was more like a proper call to action, like keep distance, stay calm, stay kind. So as a leader, always end in a very positive note with a positive call to action, because then when you finish speaking, or when you finish, let's say, when the people finish reading your email, it's the how you have communicated, how effectively you have communicated is defined by what the people feel when they finish listening to you or they finish reading your email. How they feel, what emotion they feel at that moment, that defines the success or the failure of how we have communicated with them. Just the second part of framing your communication, this is more like a framework. So I talked about some pointers, but this is kind of just giving you a cheat sheet of if you have to frame an email or you have to frame a talk, a speech. First words, so like I already mentioned, first words, they have to be really think about your first words. Probably I would say after you have created a whole email or speech, sorry, come back, read the whole thing, and think for at least a few minutes, or I would say at least 5 or 10 minutes, or as much time as you have, about what the first words should be. Because, like I said, the first words, the first 10 seconds of your talk, or the first one sentence of your email decides or defines the tone for what you're saying next. Okay. If let's say, you start your email or you start your communication that, I know all of you are stupid, or all of you are idiots. And then no matter how much good news you give them, you say that I'm giving 100% hype, I'm promoting everyone in the company, it makes no difference. So it's about what are your first words. Then it's about context with empathy. So if it's a communication where you need to give them, you're giving some decisions or informing them something, give them the context, but be very empathetic in how you're communicating. Understand, connect to them in a human manner. Speak to them personally, like in a one-on-one manner. Give a structured narrative. So that's like how, so like how the what's happening, why it is happening, how it's happening, and the information. So let's say take the example of Airbnb CEO Brian's. His was structured really very well. He talked about the how the layoffs are happening, the what. So that's like when in terms of the layoffs, how what's happening. So who are staying, who are going back, the people who are staying, what's happening to them, the people are going, what's happening to them, why it's happening. So you give a context and then the information, all those about the paychecks and everything. Actions from you. So as a leader, what would you be doing? So start off with that. And that's what even Brian did. That's what Jacinta Ardern did. She started off, both of them started off with what they are doing. So when in Brian's case, he talked about what he was doing. In Jacinta's case, she talked about what her team was doing, because end of the day, she is a spokesperson. She talks on behalf of her team. Then talk about what action is expected from others. So let's say that's your audience, your employees, your staff, your team. What actions are expected from them? So as Jacinta said, keep your distance, be kind. As Brian said, uh, thank everyone. If you're staying here, thank the people who are leaving, or if you're someone who's leaving, take care of yourself. Thanks for being part of the story. So that's including them. And then if a call to action is needed, so if you've not already mentioned that action, what's required of others, if you think there's a specific call to action needed, end it on a very positive note. So end it on a positive call to action. So that kind of then makes your whole communication complete. You start off with the first words that gives them the whole tone, and then you end off with a positive call to action that gives them a feeling of, yes, now I know what to do next, irrespective of the scenario. So that's mostly it. I think I have stuck to my time. No matter what you do or do not take away from this whole presentation, even if you forget everything else, it's fine. Just remember two words: empathy and keeping it simple. So be empathetic in how you're communicating, because understand that if you're a leader and you're communicating to a team, you are at a person who is in some sort of hierarchy, is definitely above them. So they might have a bit of, let's say, there's some kind of inferiority. When I say inferiority, not in the proper tangible meaning, but in, let's say, in a whole new dimensional meaning. They are in certain ways, I wouldn't, okay, not exactly inferior, but you hold some extra authority over them. So in terms of position or hierarchy, whatever. So be empathetic, because that's what people connect to, and keep it simple. So from this whole thing, if you don't remember about the first words, you don't remember that I spoke about keeping it crisp, you don't remember about any other things about the information part, it's fine. Two words that you definitely should remember is about empathy and keeping it simple. Because end of the day, those are two things which connect to each and every single person, irrespective of where you're from, which culture you're from, which country you're from, which side of the border you're from. And as a leader, that's what you always look at. That's all what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to communicate and reach out to everyone on a personal level. That's all from me. Thanks for this. If you have any questions, glad to take it. Or if you think you have lots of questions, or if you think whatever I spoke made no sense at all, and you want to criticize me, feel free to drop me an email or connect over LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook in that order of preference. LinkedIn definitely the most preferred one. Facebook the least one because I rarely check it. But then if you're not on Facebook, apparently you do not live in this world. That's all from me. Any questions, Andy, Aisha? I'm definitely happy to take that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vijay. This is Manju. I'm back.
Oh, hi, Manjunath. Good to hear.
I'm so sorry I couldn't join earlier, but
No worries,
that
no
was a
worries.
great presentation. I joined in between. I'm just looking around for the Q&A section there if somebody has some questions.
If nobody have a question, I have one for you.
Go ahead, Andy, please.
So Vijay, I think many of us presentations all the time, right? So all the time we have to do a technical presentations or speak something in public, make a 10-minute presentation, half an hour. What in your mind, what's the best optimal way to start a presentation? Not a speech, a presentations.
Yeah, presentation. So I would say surprise them. Yep. So surprise them or probably give them some kind of shock. So one thing, let's say, just I'll give you a personal example. Usually when I would take certain workshops, after the cover slide, my first slide would be saying that this presentation is absolute bullshit. So it means nothing. That would be my very first slide, and that's something people do not expect. So it depends on an audience. So if you're let's say if you're talking to your team, obviously you know your team the best. The first slide I would say would be something that should capture their attention. It can be something absolutely they are not expecting to hear. So anything that catches their attention, anything, it can be anything. So obviously it depends on an audience, but then it can be absolutely anything. But I would say is anything that captures their attention, especially anything they are not expecting from you. That's something which I have personally seen usually always works. And again, in terms of presentation, they say 18 minutes is the sweet spot. That's why TED Talks are 18 minutes. But if you are giving a very long presentation, I would always say these kind of shorts, or let's say even the breaks, keep it at a span of 18 minutes, or let's say roughly every 5 or 6 slides, depends on how you talk.
That's great. It's very good insight. Yeah, so I've been told that it's better that you break down your presentations in 10 minutes chunk, do something different, play videos or do something interactive to get the audience. One of the tricks or one of the way that I've heard of making it a good starter presentation is something as you said, except one thing they say the worst thing that you can do is go on and introduce yourself and talk about you, because most people already know who you are. They read your bios, so really you give them the same information that they already know. So one presenter that I saw that was very interesting. He started presentation always. There's some echoes back there. Maybe yeah. So one of the presentations I saw that was interesting was that it started by asking a question to the audience and get audience to started to get interested in some of the interesting common questions like how many people out of 10 lives in the city in the world, just to get audience engaged to the topic that you're going to talk about. I find those are really good starters, and you get their attentions. Otherwise, they start checking out as soon as you get up and say your name. They say, okay, what's going to be another half an hour of boring talk. So that is something that I learned along the way. Is there any other questions coming from the audience or?
Yes, we have a question. I do have a question here. That's a question from Rakshit. He wants to know how to practice good communication skills.
Well, good communication skills, I would say. So let's say if it's again, it can be writing in terms of your written communication, in terms of spoken communication, in terms of your non-verbal communication. So either of it, it's always about practice. So if it's your written communication, the more you write, the better you become. The more you read, the better you write. If it's about your spoken communication, the more you speak, the better you become. So I personally was. So until I was in year 11 of my school, I had tremendous stage fright. And the one thing which made me change that was in my school, in year 11, I stood for elections for the school leader, the deputy school leader. And we had to make a speech, and my speech was horrible. And I lost by a huge margin. And that's when I was like, I think I should better my speaking skills. And then for the next 1 year, until I reached year 12, almost every week, for one reason or the other, I would go on stage. For the first 2 months, I would shiver. It was very visible for everyone that I was shivering on stage. But the more I started talking on stage, the better I became. Uh, I'm not saying I'm really good right now, but then I'm pretty sure I'm much better than what I used to be when I was in year 11, standing on stage and with my knees shivering. So it's all about practice, either way, speaking, written, non-verbal. So non-verbal is probably the most difficult part to practice. The best way would be either stand in front of a full body mirror and try to practice a speech. So then you know what you're doing with your hands, what you're doing with your eyes. Are you, scratching all the time? Are you just, touching your nose all the time? Or just maybe just have a family member or a friend just look at you while you're talking and let them evaluate and say, probably you are doing this a lot, you're doing this a lot, you're scratching your head a lot, etc. So it's all about practice. Either way, whatever communication it's always about practice.
Just a few things to add there. There are things like Toastmasters Club, which give you a lot of tips around how you can communicate better. Um, Doing this ahs and ums is also something which people generally do, and that's what is called as fillers. You can probably practice your speech and record yourself so that you can go back and listen to yourself and identify where you're adding these filler words, what are the things you are pausing at, and then how you are basically pacing your speech itself. It all comes by practice at the end of the day. There was one more thing here. Please elaborate more on the field of content design.
Right. Content design, like I said, it's a very new field. The content design, the word actually was coined only in 2016 by a lady who is working with the UK government. So content design is actually a mix of content writing, user experience, and user research. So obviously, it includes a bit of communication skills. It includes a bit of design skills. It includes a bit of user experience, user journeys, mapping user journeys, kind of knowing the psychology of what user research. So simplest words, content writing plus user experience plus user research. The simplest way to put it. The field is still being, the field is, like I said, the field is very new. The field is still extending its boundaries. So probably it might have a solid definition 5 years from now.